when you're going through a seasons of like not feeling productive, there's chances are if you look back in your life, like there were seasons of you being productive. And so slowly understanding yourself and like being more kind to your mental state, I think is really important. And if you kind of just accept and almost like surrender, like, yeah, right now I don't feel that great and I don't feel like working. And I think it's really important to kind of just allow yourself to just exist and be, and not resist how you feel. And if you don't resist, then over time, like that feeling will sort of fade away. And then you'll enter that other season of like productivity.
All right. We are here on the Matt Gray Show with the legend Omid. Omid, thrilled to have you here. For those that don't know, Omid is the SEO and content legend, straight legend behind Webflow's growth, which is now valued at over $4 billion and closing in on $100 million a year in revenue. Omid, welcome to the Matt Gray Show. To kick things off here, I got a zinger for you. You probably hear this all the time, but I've been, at building on WordPress for over 9 years now and grown that up now to a community of over 14 million people. And then on the Founder OS side, we're looking to make the switch and move over to Webflow. But as I've been on Twitter and LinkedIn, there's kind of this great debate of, Webflow versus WordPress. How do you think about, that sort of approach? And I assume you're biased here, but curious how you think about it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, first off, it's great to chat with you, Matt. Yeah. WordPress versus Webflow, man. At least in the marketing world, that's a big debate. I used to be a WordPress guy. So I started building websites and blogs and doing all like that SEO content stuff with WordPress. And then one day, I think it was like 2016, 2017, I was trying to build a new media site. And what I wanted to do was create this like fully custom site, because with WordPress, that's just templates. And if you don't know how to code, it's kind of confusing on like how to actually move things around and all that. So basically what I ended up doing was looking up like HTML templates in Google, and came across this platform called Webflow. And I was like, whoa, this is really cool. It's kind of like you can build out something like a developer without really knowing how to code. It kind of had this like Photoshop-like interface. And this was around the time when Webflow also just launched their CMS. And so they had this like WordPress aspect to it. So I get on Webflow, make an account, open it up, and I'm like, this is so confusing. Like, I do not understand this. I can't do this. And I stopped and I built another WordPress site. And it wasn't until like a year later where I was working at a marketing agency and I saw our creative director building websites with Webflow. And I was like, whoa, this is like that platform. And she was like, yeah, I love this. Like, it's the best website builder. And I was like, how so? And she was kind of showing me how you can really design anything within Webflow, that you could, like, if you were to do like front end code. But she wasn't a coder. She was a designer. And so I started playing around with Webflow a little bit more, a little bit iffy on the SEO content side of things, because coming from this like WordPress background, and then kind of got the opportunity through a series of events, which maybe we might get into later, started working at Webflow and rebuilt my site. I had a WordPress blog at the time, rebuilt it in Webflow, didn't do anything besides just like rebuild this site and make sure all the URLs were, through and redirected properly and all that. And the rankings of the site improved without me doing anything. And I was like, wow, this is insane. Like, what's going on here? And kind of diving a little bit deeper into it, I realized that Webflow produces really clean and semantic code. Not saying that WordPress isn't clean, but there are some things with plugins that add extra JavaScript, and all that kind of stuff. And with Webflow, a lot of the SEO features were kind of pre-built already in the platform. Or I like to view it as this like very bare bones platform where if you don't know what you're doing, it might seem a little bit tricky, but if you know how a CMS works and how to structure content, then I think it's like one of the best platforms. And I use it for my own website, my own media blog, and that does really well with SEO. And when I was at Webflow, we used Webflow, and so the Webflow blog and template pages and everything's built inside of Webflow, and the SEO there was really good. And yeah, just kind of. It blew my mind. Just working at Webflow, I realized that this was going to be like the biggest like Webflow or WordPress alternative. And like internally, I knew it down to my core. And early days of Webflow, you'd hear a lot of people pushing back on like, oh no, like you'd see conversations on Twitter, like WordPress is still king. But then slowly over time, seeing a lot of big websites migrating over from WordPress and even other platforms onto Webflow and kind of like just grew my confidence in the platform a lot. I know that was very long.
That's
but,
awesome. No, that's perfect.
Yeah,
no, from our conversations, when I put this survey out to Twitter to understand, is it Webflow, WordPress? I probably got 70% of people coming back to me being like, WordPress is the place, like WordPress is the place. And started having different chats though with like some really high level experts. Shout out to people like Casey Winters, Ethan from Graphite, yourself. And it was shocking to me because out of the, the goats of SEO that I know, everyone was saying, listen, there's been a shift, like Webflow is the spot. And it really kind of set me over the edge to go, okay, never mind. I'm not putting founderos.com on, the WordPress side. I'm going to go and take the plunge here on Webflow. And, from the sounds of it, a lot of the, lot easier, less plugins, out the box. It seems like it's just a lot easier to rank for things. And, it's one of those confusing spaces oftentimes as a founder. Like the SEO realm can be so difficult to kind of figure out. It kind of feels like some black magic going on or something, and a lot of founders, I think when they're getting started, or even ones I know, I was just talking to a guy that runs, one of the biggest sort of religion companies out there and saying, he struggled with finding the ROI for SEO for his business. So leads me to my next kind of question for you is, when you're working with a company, whether it's what you've done at Webflow, it's what you're doing with marketermilk.com, or what you're doing for other clients that you have, how do you create an SEO content strategy?
Yeah. Good question. I actually have a blog post about this. If you Google like SaaS content marketing, it should come up. But the way that I look at it, it really depends on the type of company that you're working with, and the business model. And so I can speak to the SaaS space because that's what I know most. It's what I focus on. But like if you're a marketplace, it's going to look very different. If you're kind of more enterprise, it might look a little bit different. If you're more freemium, it might look different. But in the case of like, or even if you're like, say, an affiliate site that, is like, say, a travel blogger or something, it could look slightly different. But the way that I look at, like search is looking at this through a user journey. So like a user search journey. So Google's goal is to end the user search journey as quickly as possible. So if you kind of keep that in mind, say you want to write an article about how to learn web design. Well, if you know that Google's search journey or Google's goal is to end the user search journey as quickly as possible, you're going to make sure that that article about how to learn web design is the best article that somebody can read on that topic. And it's going to mention everything that leaves no stone unturned, basically a full in-depth article about how to learn web design and all the resources and linking out to all these sources. The idea is that like, you don't want somebody to click on, say, your article and then click back and click on a different article. Because then that's kind of like this pogo sticking concept where Google knows that like, oh, this article is not serving this search intent. So kind of that first thing of creating the best article and the search intent, which I think, there's a lot of different ranking factors when it comes to SEO, but I would say the number one is search intent. And what I mean by that is like, if there's a topic or a keyword you want to go after in like an incognito or private browsing window, simply Google that keyword and see what comes up. Like if you look up web developer portfolios and you'll see that like, oh, it's probably a bunch of listicles of web developer portfolios because Google has deemed that's the search intent. When someone's looking for web developer portfolio, they're looking for a list or they're looking for inspiration and examples of web developer portfolios. But I've seen some companies go after a keyword like that and write an article like how to create a web developer portfolio, which in that case, like that article is going to have a hard time ranking strongly for that keyword because the search intent is not right for that term. But in terms of just like overall SEO strategy, thinking about that user search journey, I think about it in this concept of like going through, and this is not like anything new when it comes to marketing. The way that I kind of structure it is going through these stages of awareness that somebody goes through. So And hold on, I'm actually going to bring up my own
Take your
diagram
time.
just so I don't mess this up.
Yeah.
I look
You're
at it as a
gem.
stage of
Let's
like
get
going through, going through problem aware to solution aware to product aware to then most aware. So let me give an example of like, let's say there's this company that creates like email. It's an email marketing like outbound tool for sales reps or something. Let's say that's like the company that's trying to create an SEO strategy, just hypothetically. You have to, if you think about the type of person that would use that product, there's this level of going from problem aware, which they know they have a problem, which could be like, hey, I need to like create an outbound strategy for my agency to like help me acquire more clients. That's like the very top of funnel, all the way down to like the very bottom of funnel of thinking of like, you already know what tools exist. So you might look up like any sort of like competitors like Outreach, or there's some other companies. So it might be like Outreach versus this. That is like the very high intent. Somebody's ready to purchase a product like that. So if we think about it from say the top of funnel to the bottom of funnel, top of funnel would be something like, how do I create an outbound strategy? And then when you think about what kind of topics you should go for that pool, it could be like, usually what I've seen work and what really worked at Webflow and a lot of SaaS companies I've worked with is kind of example articles, like the inspirational listicles, and then a lot of like high level tutorials. So something could be like how to find email addresses, or like outbound marketing, or how to send a cold email. These could be like the very top of funnel things. Then when somebody kind of when someone's searching in that stage, they're problem aware. And so once they figure out, how to send an outreach email, they might then become more solution aware, where they're like, oh, okay, now I need an email tool or like some platform to help me do this at scale. And in this kind of middle of funnel range, you could call it, a lot of templates and in-depth tutorials start to do really well. So people might look up like best outreach software, or like outreach templates, like email outreach templates for agencies. And if you're a SaaS company that's an outreach tool, you really want to be like creating templates that your customers could use. And so this is like this stage where people are like, they may just start to discover actually your product. And say your company is called like Reach Them, just random name. But at this point, somebody's like, oh, wow, like Reach Them looks like a pretty cool tool. Let me see what it can do for me. And they might look up like a competitor they might know versus Reach Them. Or they might look up like Reach Them tutorial setup or like something like that. Where at this point is like this product aware acquisition stage. And then this is when somebody usually would sign up for your product. And depending on kind of the business model, if it's, in this case, I'm speaking from like a freemium product, this is like where somebody would sign up for like a free trial or a free account. And then, if you wanted to get them to upgrade, this is where you think about like activation content. And at this point, like SEO from a non-branded perspective, maybe isn't going to drive net new customers, but this is how you're going to activate customers, where you create a lot of like product or content around your product. So a lot of like tutorials for Reach Them, the platform, like comparisons, like Reach Them versus the different alternatives, and then guides about like how to grow your lists within Reach Them and all that kind of stuff. So I know this is like very hard to visualize, or for me, I have to visualize it. So that's why I wrote that blog post. If you want to check it out, that kind of shows a diagram of my thinking behind all of this. And this was pretty much like a framework that we developed at Webflow to really help us try to figure out, what was the content that drove a lot of brand awareness, and then what was the content that drove a lot of conversions, because these are kind of two different buckets.
Right. So yeah, you dropped a lot of gems there. So yeah, you have the different sort of more awareness search terms that you're looking for, like, what's like the best email tool, or what's like, how do I create an email like, that converts, whatever. And then there's more kind of high purchase intent search volume, which is going to be around things like comparisons and things like that. You also mentioned the gem there of, looking in an incognito window. I'm curious, like over the last year as an example, what are like a few hacks that you've discovered on the SEO side that you're now sort of doubling down on? And what was the impact made by those?
Okay, that's a good one. Few hacks. I don't know about the word hack, but I get what you're saying. There is one strategy where a lot of SEOs, they'll jump into a keyword research tool, like I'm not going to name them, but some of the big platforms, just any sort of keyword research tool, and they'll make their judgment based off of like, okay, this looks like it's low competition. This is like a decent search volume, and they add it to their list of keywords to go after. And that can work, but I think if you're going from this 0 to 1 stage, which was, when I joined Webflow, it was kind of this like going from 1 to 2 or like 1 to 100, whatever you want to say. It was more so scale. And so when I started my own, like when I started Marketer Milk, it was all about 0 to 1, like brand new website. How am I going to grow this thing? And I started doing a lot of the scaling tactics that I was doing at Webflow, and I found that like it wasn't working that well. And so one thing I started doing was I was like, you know what, let me basically I had a bunch of different keyword research tools, and I was comparing results, and I was seeing that like one keyword research tool would show certain options that like the other tool didn't show. So it kind of made me think like, okay, what are these like keywords that I don't even know about that these tools won't even show? And those are the kind of the keywords that I want to go after, because I know most people aren't going after those keywords because they're using these tools instead. And so the incognito strategy is that if you look at like when you type something in Google, you'll notice that there's like this Google auto suggest or autocomplete, whatever the actual term is. That's actually stuff that people are searching kind of in real time. And a lot of times keyword research tools won't like completely, sometimes they will, but in some cases it won't accurately reflect what people are searching in real time to like what, like you might look up best, here's an example like I'll give from my own blog, best newsletter, and then you type space, and the first option is like best newsletter platform. And a keyword research tool, say like 2 years ago, might have been like this doesn't really have any search volume. But the fact that I looked up like best space newsletter space, and then the first option was platforms, I realized that like, oh, this was a term that people were searching a lot right now, and the keyword research tool just hasn't had enough time to pick up on this. And as a new blog, it's very hard to go after a topic like newsletter platforms if you're competing against like the MailChimps of the world and all these really big companies that have been established. But what I found for that article specifically was that when I looked up best newsletter and then platforms popped up and I Googled that term, I analyzed the first page, and I noticed that none of the articles on the first page were actually optimizing around that term. Google was actually showing blog posts that were like email marketing software and a lot of things around email marketing, like email marketing tools, email marketing platforms. And these were all the articles that were ranking, and they were from huge websites. Like I thought there was no way that my tiny little blog was going to be able to outrank these like huge tech companies that have a bunch of money and funding and all that, and huge SEO teams behind them. But I was like, you know what? In this auto suggest strategy or this autocomplete strategy, I'm seeing that, of course, like people are looking up this term, or else why is Google showing it in this autocomplete? And then when I search it, I don't see clear optimization around this keyword. And when I say like a clear optimization, I mean, I don't see it in the URL slug. So like the slug would be like, yourwebsite.com/blog/whatever that slug is. I don't see anybody optimizing around best newsletter platform. It's all like email marketing software. I don't see any term of best newsletter platform in like the meta title or the meta description. So nobody's really optimizing around this term. And I was like, you know what, let me write a really good article about this. And I was kind of like this shot in the dark too, because I didn't really know if this was actually going to rank that well, or if there was even a lot of search volume behind it. I just kind of had this hunch because Google was showing it to me. Wrote the article. A few months later, it starts ranking, and then it ranks number 1, and it becomes like one of my most trafficked articles, and it's an affiliate article too, and one of like the biggest money making articles. Which I don't know if I should have said that, but because I just invited some competition. No, but it's okay. Yeah, so that's kind of the trick. I would say if you're a brand new website is like find topics around things you want to create and type them into, as you're typing them into Google, like in an incognito or private window, so it's not showing you tailored results of your previous searches. Figure out what are these like longer tail things. Like a lot of times too, you can type in like, you know, how to start a business space. And then there's like all these long tail stuff, like how to start a business with no money, how to start a business, you know, in Canada, how to start a business in Mexico. Like you'll see a bunch of these long tail things. And then if you then search those long tail terms and then look at the first page and see most of the articles aren't actually optimizing around that specific keyword, even if like there's a lot of big media sites showing up, but they're not optimizing on that keyword, I would say go for it, and then try to, you know, write a good article about that.
That's awesome. No, that's a huge tip, and I'm definitely going to take you up on that one. So yeah, you know, going to your incognito window, typing in, you know, a couple words that lead people potentially to search terms around your topic, and then seeing what the Google auto suggest sort of brings up, I think is a major hack. Now, it's cool to see that you also wrote about that for your own sort of space and were able to, you know, rank a new article on a newer site and start making real money from it. I'm curious, like whenever most founders go to, whether it's in, you know, they look to hire someone for SEO or they look to bring on an agency for SEO, the common thing that you hear is like, this is a long game. You got to be patient and, you know, you got to wait, you know, 6 months, a year for the thing to really pay off. I'm curious, you know, from your standpoint, you've obviously, you know, you've got that long-term view with everything that you're building. That said, you're also getting real results. What are some of the best strategies that you've seen to drive revenue from SEO?
Drive revenue from SEO. Focus, again, it depends on the type of business you're running. Like if you're running a media site and you monetize through affiliate or through like AdSense or just ads in general, you want to go like very top of funnel, like best type list articles, and really try to just like create as much content as you can to just increase the overall, like your virtual, like each blog post to me is like a piece of virtual real estate. Like how do you just expand all your little properties on the web?
Yep.
But if you're not a media site and you're, say, more of a SaaS company, I would say focus, going back to kind of this user search journey, focus on the bottom of the funnel. So like any sort of SEO or like SaaS client that I work with, I always start like like they're like, we want to scale our organic traffic and all that. And I'm like, yeah, but you're doing this because you want conversions and you want customers. And like, yeah, of course. I'm like, okay, well, you know, let's start off with the conversion side of things and let's go after like very low search terms that have much higher intent and start there. And then we'll work up to being more like a full-blown media company. So I would start like for conversions, very bottom of the funnel, of like just thinking the type of mindset somebody is when they're searching for something like if somebody's searching, you know, ConvertKit versus MailChimp, there's a good chance that, you know, they're ready to like sign up for an email marketing platform. And so one strategy you can do, which I've experimented with different clients and it's worked really well, it's kind of like a sneaky strategy, is you can write an article like say you're an email marketing platform. You can write an article like MailChimp versus ConvertKit, go after that keyword, and then in your article, compare MailChimp versus ConvertKit, and then compare your own company to both of them as an alternative. And so what you're doing is you're kind of leveraging the brand equity of these two other companies to then insert yourself in the conversation at this like super high intent stage that somebody is in. That's like one strategy. Or doing like alternatives, like MailChimp alternatives, WordPress alternatives. These ones might be like very competitive. But if you're in like a space where there's like a notable competitor, but also there's not like a huge category leader in the space, you can kind of do this strategy. If there aren't already like affiliates and media sites already doing the strategy, because I'm just speaking from an affiliate marketing perspective. Like these are the revenue drivers for affiliate posts, and because they're driving conversions and revenue. And so a lot of SaaS companies are now trying to also take that approach too. So going after like brand A versus brand B, but then you're brand C and you insert yourself in the conversation, or doing brand A alternatives, brand B alternatives. That's like very, very bottom of funnel, these comparison and alternative posts. And then the other ones would be kind of a more like product led approach, which the way that I kind of think about product led is using your own product within a blog post. Again, speaking from like a SaaS company perspective, and I can speak from like Webflow perspective here of like, say like how to design a website. What you can do in an article like that, if you're a company like Webflow, is, in the article show, how to design a website, like, create a style guide and think about like what your brand colors and, all that kind of stuff. And then in that article too, you can actually start designing the website within Webflow. And so you're actually showing your product within the article, but you're going after the keyword, like how to design a website. So people don't really have to know about your company yet. But it's kind of like just incorporating your product into that piece. And that really all depends on like the features or use cases that your product has, and how you can create like broader how-to guides around that. So those are kind of the two that I see do pretty well from conversions. And yeah, once you have like the foundation of that, then you can go very top of funnel and like just, it's kind of like a brand awareness thing.
Yep. I've seen a similar strategy work really well at Herb, where, in the cannabis space, we've, been able to grow a lot of traffic from, more that top of funnel, how to, best of, what is type content. And then, as you're trying to drive people down to the bottom of funnel, things like different comparisons, doing in-depth product breakdowns, product reviews, and kind of, catching people then more on the conversion side of things. So finding that kind of right balance, and also, targeting the right things depending on the stage your company's at makes a lot of sense kind of early on. If you're just getting going, and you're looking to convert people to, say, your SaaS offering, focusing more on that bottom of funnel conversion oriented type content is likely going to have the most immediate impact to your bottom line. I'm curious to kind of switch gears here for a sec. I know you're just like me. We both love to travel. We love startups and love to build things and explore the world. I think I've been traveling for the last decade now, basically, and building businesses while traveling to, Vietnam, Cambodia, all through New Zealand, Peru, Colombia, currently in Puerto Escondido, Mexico, and going to be going back to Medellin, Colombia here in a month. And, when you're traveling around and building businesses, it's a lot. Sometimes travel alone in its own way is like a full-time sort of thing, coordinating where you're going to be, where you're staying, getting to know the lay of the land, depending on how long you stay in a destination, which I'm generally in a spot for around 60 days and then move on. And then on the other side, building companies is a ton of work, obviously, in a full-time job, and comes with its own stresses, whether it's emotional stress, mental stress, and it can just be a lot. I'm curious, you're really big on traveling, you're big on startups. How do you kind of balance these two realms of your life?
Yeah. I'm going to be totally honest. It's very hard to balance it. And, I think I was traveling a lot when I was working at Webflow and kind of COVID happened, and just like you, like traveling a lot throughout Central America, trying to stay within the North America time zone. And it was really helpful to have somebody that was also in the same boat as what I was doing. So when I was traveling, I was actually traveling with the head of social media, Deepak, at Webflow. And
nice.
We were like traveling together. And so it was really nice because we were kind of at the time working at the same company, but also being able to travel. So we would, be pretty disciplined and sitting down and setting up our laptops, a little bit hard when you're in like tropical paradise to focus sometimes. But definitely having somebody or like being able to have a group of people around you that are doing the same thing at that time, is really important, because when you're sitting next to somebody and seeing them working, it feels more motivating for you to work. But what happened was, when I did leave Webflow to kind of, build out this small SEO agency, and then also working on Market and Milk and this media company, I ended up moving to Costa Rica, which is a beautiful country. And I was there for a few months, and it was really hard for me to to focus. It was like, I'm the type of person where that my environment affects me a lot. And you know, I love writing. Like that is like, if there's one thing I like would just want to do all day if I could is just write. And when I went to Costa Rica, I was like, this is going to be a great place to, you know, go in the jungle, on the beach, and just write all day. And it works for some people. And for me, I was just so like, I don't know, I just felt really groggy and just didn't want to do anything. I just want to kind of lay around and not do much and just kind of chill. And I would have this internal battle with myself of like, I'm not being productive and I have to be productive. And, it was pretty rough. So I can't say that I'm very good at, being able to balance that. And so when I decided to figure out like where I was going to go to next, I thought of, you know, where is the place with a lot of energy and a lot of like this hustle and bustle, the city life. And for me, that was New York. And so I came to New York. And it's weird because in New York, like there's times where I have an insane amount of like drive. And then there's other times where I get kind of drained because it's like too much. It's a little overwhelming. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of this like ongoing thing that you have to really work on yourself. Like at least the one thing I realized with the whole startup thing outside of just traveling is like the difference between somebody that like can actually be successful and somebody who maybe gives up a little bit too early, is like your state of your mental health and like your psyche. And realizing like for me in the past, I would, you know, try to work on myself and meditate and read books and journal, and go into this state of like flow and do really great with my work. And then as I'm like getting into my work and executing a lot, I would stop doing those things. And then slowly a few months later, I would like hit a wall, and be like, what's going on? Like, why is my brain just always changing? Like some seasons it's super productive and some seasons it doesn't want to do anything. And then I kind of realized like, oh, I mean, it's kind of like going to the gym. If you work out for a year and get really fit, and then don't work out for like 6 months, you're going to almost lose a lot of those like muscle gains, or you might, you know, your stamina might get a little bit worse. And I realize it's the same thing with like the mental part of things is like, you have to like keep working on it. And so that was like a big realization is like the physical health and the mental health are both things that you have to constantly be working on. And yeah, I'm still like trying to balance it. And yeah, like just this week, it was like pretty intense of working a lot. But also, you know, I don't know. It's tough. It's just, I guess maybe not being too hard on yourself. Like when you're feeling pretty low and not productive, like not beating yourself about it. Because at least I realized like that when you're going through a seasons of like not feeling productive, there's chances are if you look back in your life, like there were seasons of you being productive. And so slowly understanding yourself and like being more kind to the state and like your mental state, I think is really important. And if you kind of just accept and almost like surrender, like, yeah, right now I don't feel that great and I don't feel like working. And I know it's kind of the opposite of like this whole be disciplined and don't act on your emotions and all this stuff. And some degree there is truth of like discipline over motivation, but also I think it's really important to kind of just allow yourself to just exist and be, and not resist how you feel. And if you don't resist, then over time, like that feeling will sort of fade away. And then you'll enter that other season of like productivity. So I guess just like not feeling guilt or shame about like, you know, just not feeling great and not feeling productive. And that was one thing I wish I did when I was in Costa Rica and I was beating myself up for just not wanting to do anything. And it made a lot of sense. Like I just came out of working at this company for a few years that scaled like crazy, went from like startup to $1 billion company. And here I was right away trying to start my own company. So it just made a lot of sense of like why I just couldn't really be as productive as I wanted to be.
Totally. No, I see it very similar to you. I mean, I think with building companies, it's early on, you see a lot of people that just go so hard, so fast, and then they just run themselves into the ground. And you quickly sort of learn, hopefully, that this is really a long game. and getting too addicted to the outcomes and being too hard on yourself is really counterproductive. Like, to be successful over the long term, you need to, like you said, you need to be kind to yourself. You're going to need to show up, and you're going to have some days where showing up means just doing a little bit and maybe it's actually quite garbage. And some days you're going to show up and create magic. I've been kind of practicing this approach recently where it's almost like just really lowering the expectations of the work I'm going to be able to put in. So like if I tell myself, hey, I need to go and create a newsletter today, let's say, I'm going to be quite all right to just put something down and just start it. And kind of lowering that bar, lowering that expectation, makes the bar of just allowing me to kind of check it off my brain just a lot lower, versus like, I need to write the perfect newsletter today. It needs to be better than this newsletter I saw last Saturday, and kind of putting a ton of pressure on myself with that task that then just kind of can be crippling and lead to a lot of action paralysis and just an internal dialogue that's not all that healthy. And so I also resonate too with, when you're traveling around, it's interesting how each of these cities have their own energy to them. New York being one extreme for sure on that sort of that hustle, that bustle. You could be, you're making 200K in New York, and, you got a long way to go. Like, you still feel like you really got to grind, and you're constantly just seeing people in different fields, collaborating with different people. There's a lot. The energy there is infectious. And then you go to places, like I've been to Nasara, Costa Rica, or, where I am now, Port Escondido, Mexico. And it's quite the opposite. Like, I feel like I'm, one of, several people there really doing what I'm doing on this sort of, startup grind. It's all like those ebbs and flows, and there's seasons to it all. Some seasons, you're really motivated to kind of launch something, produce something, or just motivated intrinsically to kind of sharpen your craft. And then, after you've done that, it's important to have those seasons of celebration, of relaxation, of rejuvenation to kind of slow down. And I've been finding these days, and it sounds maybe similar to you, that the greatest work and the stuff that feels like work is being more disciplined about the relaxing part, and viewing that as like an important component to the whole thing. So like, oh, I put down my phone, it's in another room, and I tell myself I'm going to unplug totally this Saturday. Like, practice that. And it may be difficult, and you may have a weird thought come up in your head, or you may feel lazy that day, or who knows what, right? But practice the spaciousness, practice getting away from technology for a minute, to then when you come back, have that kind of build up again of creativity, of energy. And, I think that kind of, becoming more attuned to those, and like you're saying, it's a continual balance, I think is key to the longevity of this game, versus, going hard in the paint for a year and then burning out.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is like, if you want to like travel and build a company or build a creator business, or, whatever type of company you want to build while traveling, at least what I've come to find maybe for myself is that it's really hard to go into a new environment and then start something from like going from 0 to 1, because you're really shocking your body. And like, not just that you're in a new environment, but also you're trying to do something completely like potentially new than what you were doing before. So I think it's probably a lot, at least when I think about it in my perspective, it probably would have been a lot healthier had I, started my business, got some momentum, got it to a place where, like I felt comfortable about, the trajectory that I was on, and then I would start traveling, where I, already know the types of this, I have the systems in place of like what's going on, and I'm just enjoying the journey. And then I would travel, and, I feel like it would have been a little bit more chill, had I done it that way than, trying to start your business in a completely new environment, where at least for me, like I just quit my job like before anything was really popping off, which I was told like not to do by some people. I had a friend that did it, that was like, you can only focus on one thing at a time. Like you just have to do it this way. And, in hindsight, I kind of wish I did get a little bit more to a place of like being a little bit more confident before I quit my job. But in my case, it was like, I quit and it didn't really hit me until a month after like what I had done. And it just kind of freaked me out. And then I would wake up and I'm like, in a jungle somewhere, at the same time. And I'd be like, what am I doing? So I just freaked out. And it took a while of, slowly, really at that point I realized like, okay, I really need to like focus on being more calm, not letting like my emotions get the better of me, journaling, meditating, finding faith. And that was like a big aspect of kind of what calmed me down, and like, just calm my mind. And when your mind is calm, that is when like, a lot of the great ideas start coming. Because if your mind is not quiet and you're not like being able to sit still, it's going to be very hard to like listen to your intuition, and which has been like my compass has always been my intuition. And it's very hard to hear it when there's just too much stuff going on in my life.
Yeah, I get that question a lot from people that are aiming to kind of quit their 9 to 5 and figure out like when's that best timing to then move on to going full time on their other thing. And the best advice I got on this kind of subject was, to view sort of moving from one opportunity, like your 9 to 5 to full time doing your own thing, as if you're like Tarzan swinging on vines in the jungle. You kind of have your existing vine that you're swinging on. That's your like 9 to 5. And you can see off in the distance this other vine that you want to go and you want to catch. Well, you start swinging on the one and you gradually grab the other. And then when you start to kind of gain that momentum in the other, and it feels like you kind of have some lift off there, to kind of then release the vine of the 9 to 5 and keep swinging with the new venture. But that balance is a lot, obviously, easier said than done. And finding that like perfect moment, I don't even think it exists. Inevitably, it comes down to, like you're saying, dialing in that intuition, going inward and kind of doing what feels right at the right moment. And at some juncture, just having to kind of take that plunge and trust your gut. Is that kind of how it felt for you?
Yeah, I think it was a big concept around, there's a saying of like, leap and a net will appear. And I kind of just like took this leap, and granted, like I had this idea of like coming out of Webflow that like, okay, I know SEO, I know how to build websites. And that's like, I think if you can have, like if you can master one skill and then be decently good at another skill that kind of can complement it, I think that's when like you become very confident in like your ability to make something happen. And for me, it was like content marketing and SEO was like the skill that, it's forever changing, and like who knows where things are going to go with all this AI stuff coming out. But like that was one thing that I felt the most competent on in marketing. Granted, like I love everything about marketing. Like I've been able to touch a lot of aspects of it, but SEO was something I was always drawn to. And then now being able to actually know how to build custom websites with a platform like Webflow, just gave me the confidence of like, I can build websites and I can make them grow. Like I think I'll be okay. It is going to take some time to get this site up and off the ground. And it did take like 7 months of work to actually like see some noticeable results. But those were, when I did leave my job, those were skills that I had at that moment. And so one way that I kind of survived essentially is, one, I kind of planned this jump a year in advance. And so I was living in San Francisco and I moved, and that's why I started traveling, which was actually cheaper for me to do that than live in San Francisco. And so I started saving a lot of money and trying to build myself like this runway that I would just live off my savings for a bit. But also I was like, you know what, let me just help other companies with their content and their SEO. And that was kind of how I started to, survive, I guess, when I did take the leap of faith. So yeah, it's really, really wild of just like random opportunities would come up at like the craziest times, like when I needed to figure out like, oh, I need to, pay this person that I'm working with. Like I can pay them out of the money I have, but like, I wonder if there's an opportunity that can come up that can like help cover this cost. And then somehow like some company would just reach out and be like, hey, like, can you help us with SEO? And I'd be like, wow, this is insane. Like how things are just happening. I like, that's the other thing that I think a lot of founders maybe don't talk about is like luck. And like, I've gotten lucky a lot. But I actually had a friend that I was having a conversation with who runs like, he runs a VC-backed company here in New York. And he was telling me that like when you're on your path and like you're aligned with like your intuition and what you're meant to do, that is like when you start to get really lucky. And so that kind of was like, oh, it almost like made me realize like, oh, this is the right thing that I should be doing. Cause I'm kind of an overthinker. Like I'm like, did I do the right thing? Should I have not left this company? Should I have done this? Should I have done that? But then calming down, listening to my intuition, and then seeing these kind of opportunities happen. I mean, the big part of like, us meeting was this kind of thing of, it just kind of happened. We got, intro through a mutual friend, and, it's really hard to like look at what can happen in the future, but looking back, I can see like, had I not done X, Y, and Z in my past, like I probably would have never been, I wouldn't be here talking with you. So kind of just like trusting that, I guess.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of serendipity involved with it. And I think to your credit, I mean, the, honing in on your craft and the SEO content side, you kind of, I think content for me has always increased my surface area for luck, community, and connections, and I think it's one of the most beautiful part of being a writer and publishing online is that you just attract and are a magnet for like just awesome people, opportunities, and connections. So I'm curious, as you've been building, I had a kind of a crazy scenario kind of come up over the last couple of weeks. A woman I like enormously respect, who actually started inspiring me to lean into being more of a creator, putting more videos out there, leaning into platforms like YouTube and Instagram more. I went to this amazing mastermind, met people like Alex Hormozy, Layla Hormozy, Sam Ovens last year, and was kind of really encouraged to just lean more into this content game. A crazy thing came up a couple of weeks ago where this one woman decided that she was going to shut it all down, shut down her content, wind down the team, say goodbye to a lot of clients, and was just going to go on an indefinite sabbatical. And it really just kind of caught me by surprise. And it made me kind of think to myself, like, okay, hey, like, am I on the right path? And how am I doing internally? And how do I make sure that I'm kind of future proofing whatever I'm doing to ensure that over the long term, this is sustainable? I think, I can reflect on myself. I'm oftentimes a guy that like just kind of like take on more opportunities and keep on just driving forward. And oftentimes I find the magic in building is really eliminating things as much as you can, and as much as you can also automating and delegating so that, again, what you're doing is sustainable. So I had this conversation with a coach after that to kind of get his 2 cents on, how do I make this whole game more sustainable? How do I continue to future-proof what I'm doing? And one awesome tip that came from it was to, if you think about, say, creating a video or something, how do you make this setup like just a one-click setup where, you have your setup in a room, it's ready to go, you sit down in the chair when you feel inspired, ride that wave of inspiration, and boom, a video's created, versus like this arduous feeling of like, man, I got to set all this stuff up. I got to set up a mic. I got to set up the camera, and I got to, get the script done, and making the task bigger maybe than it needs to be. I'm curious, that's been kind of something I've been honing in more over the last couple of weeks and thinking about other areas of my life that I can kind of have that sort of one-click setup, or just making things so much easier that may currently have a little bit of mental debt or even sometimes anguish associated with them. I'm curious on your side of things, have there been any of these sort of, little tips or tricks that you've kind of implemented in your life to just make a given task you got to do just that much kind of easier and more seamless?
Yeah. I write a lot. So I got myself a nice mechanical keyboard, and that kind of makes it more enjoyable to type. It's interesting making it like, I guess, are you saying more like, how do you decrease friction in like the things that you want to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can use writing as an example, because I know that's that's the core of kind of your calling, it seems, and something that gives you immense joy. So how do you, when you think about writing as an example, which I think is what a lot of people are aiming to do as they grow their audience online, how do you approach that? So it's like just as like a seamless, like what does your routine look like there to make it as frictionless as possible?
Yeah. Well, one is like, I want to do it. So that is like,
yeah, that's a big part.
It's kind of, it's kind of like people that like love running. Like I used to be like, why do people like running? It's so like, it just seems exhausting, and some people are obsessed with it. And then I slowly started to do it myself, and now I'm like obsessed with running. So like you have to want to do something. I think A lot of times of decreasing kind of that friction, and I don't know, because it looks so different for everyone. But I guess like for me, it's about accountability. Like the way that I kind of have created this, I don't have like a co-founder, and I think that's like one of the hardest things is being a solo founder. So like if you are going to start a company and you're thinking about it, like try to find a partner if you can. You don't have to, but I feel like the accountability aspect really makes it a lot, I don't want to say easier to work, but it kind of like makes you go into this mindset of like, no matter what, I have to do this thing. And for me, it's been like, for example, writing my newsletter. I've just created this, like at first, like just a fake timeline of like, this is coming out every Tuesday at, 12 PM. And slowly just started doing that. And some of my readers are now expecting that of me, of like Tuesday, 12 PM. And that, like, sometimes I'm not motivated to write that newsletter. But sometimes, to be honest, like it's Tuesday morning and I still haven't done it. And so I just go into this like crazy like mode of everything. I just go super tunnel vision and just crank it out before that Tuesday at 12 PM. Because I've created this like thing of like, people are expecting this to come out at this time. So this like thing of like accountability, and a lot of times too, like I've done a lot of freelance writing, and I think with writing too, it's very tricky because I experienced this myself when I was just writing for my blog, and I was like, okay, I want to write, say, 3 articles a week, or at one point I was like, I'm going to write an article a day, and then I would start writing like 1 a week, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, why can't I get myself to write as much? And I realized it's kind of like this slow process. Like I wanted to go from writing 3 articles a week from writing like 1 article a month. And so it's like taking these slow steps to get there. And now I'm at the point where I can write an article a day if I needed to, but it was never like that. Like I started off with just writing 1 a week. And then I was like, okay, let me try to do 2 a week. And so slowly ramping it up. But really, like if you're just writing for yourself, or if you want to write or like create content, if there's no accountability, it's very tough. Like if other people aren't relying on you to get something, to put something out, or expecting you to put something out, it's very tough, because you can just lay in bed and be like, well, nobody really knows I exist yet. Like nobody's going to see this LinkedIn thread or this blog post. Like, do I really need to publish it today? Like, probably not. I'll just do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow you feel the same way, and then it just keeps getting delayed. But what changed the like writing habit or that muscle for me was freelance writing, which was like another thing of like, I want to write and build out content, but how can I like make money now? Because I just quit my job and I need to survive. I need to pay bills. And I was like, okay, let me freelance write. And in that case, it's like you're on deadlines. Where you have to get a piece of content out, like no matter how you feel. Like it could be, for me, I'm kind of like a chronic procrastinator, so I have to create these deadlines. I used to be the person that would, sometimes be doing the homework the morning of, like before I turned it in. So having like working with clients that were like, hey, we need this article by Tuesday. And I'm going into the weekend. I'm like, okay, well, I know like Monday I too busy. Like I got to get this done like this Saturday afternoon or something. And because I had that accountability, I would do it. And I started freelance writing a lot, to the point where like I did get to that like 1 article a day. And then it became like very easy to write, and my writing speed became really fast. And I went from like it taking me on pretty much an entire day to write an article, like 8 hours, 8 to 10 hours, to being able to like write that similar article in like 2 hours, because I just started writing a lot. But I got to that stage because I had this accountability of like working with clients, and so they expected it of me. And just doing that for like a few months to like a year, then it made writing feel a lot more easier. And then your writing gets better. And like, as you get better at doing something, it boosts your confidence, and you want to keep doing it. Like with the gym or with running, like you hit a new PR and you get excited and you just want to like keep hitting new PRs. And that was kind of how like writing for me felt like, was like the initial spark to get it going. I needed this level of accountability. And sometimes that can look like, if you're starting a startup, like raising money, and of course you have investors relying on you, or you have a co-founder and you're both relying on each other and you don't want to let each other down. But when you're running a solo bootstrapped company, it's like really hard. So you got to figure out ways of like, how can you actually create this accountability, whether through like working with other companies or partnerships of like people relying on you, or just creating an audience where you tell them like, hey, new video every Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. And they're expecting that of you. And so no matter how you feel at that point, like if you're motivated, if you're not, like you're just going to get it out. And over time, like this concept of you saying the one-click publish, like you're not going to know how to do that from day one. Like you're learning that now after producing so much content. So the beginning is always going to be like very scrappy and messy until you kind of iterate on that process over time. And you just can't escape that like iteration time that it takes.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I think we're all guilty of, looking at someone out there online. Maybe it's someone who's large on Twitter or someone who has a massive YouTube, and we instantly kind of want to be at that level. But it's so easy to forget that skill is like a muscle, and that person's basically like a bodybuilder. And if you want to get to that level, like you got to just start with focusing on taking action now, and just those little tiny wins, those baby steps that will just to gradually allow you to kind of go from where you are now to building up those new muscles, building up that new craft. Well, whether it's creating videos or writing daily or becoming good at SEO or whatever it may be. So yeah, definitely resonate with that. And I think that, finding some sort of public accountability is one great hack for gradually kind of honing in that forcing function for you to continually do something. I know in Founder OS, we've developed the kind of Founder OS content challenge where people every day are publishing content, and the kind of whole community is rallying around this sort of challenge that everyone's doing, and kind of commenting under each other's stuff and helping each other and being a source of encouragement and accountability. I think, I often use, mentors, coaches, or just peers to kind of like, and sometimes even in like a friendly competition way, try to like, create just amazing content or stick to a habit as long as each other. And that kind of level of just like friendly camaraderie helps to make things fun, but also keep that consistency there. I think contrary to one thing you said there, I feel like a lot of people default early on to thinking that they need a co-founder for that accountability. And personally, I see a lot of people make that mistake. And I've made that mistake before in my life. So maybe I'm a little overly sensitive to it. But, when I was younger, thinking I needed co-founders to build a business, and, quickly, you realize that either way, like whether you have co-founders or whether you're building something on your own, it's going to be hard, and you're going to have to figure out accountability regardless. I find that the issue with co-founders is long-term. I think a lot of us are looking to also, create freedom for ourselves. And part of that is like, generating some serious cash flows from the business and maybe being able to sell it one day. And I think the number one reason why most businesses fail is co-founder issues. So you're kind of instantly opening yourself up to just one of the biggest risks of why startups fail. And it's so hard to tell early on if it's the right person, because it's so hard to tell if that person's going to scale with the business. So I tell people to really choose a co-founder really, really wisely and make that decision slowly if you can. And I mean, when in doubt, just go solo, at least for as long as you can. Because oftentimes it's like getting into a marriage with someone, but unless you know them really, really well and you have experience working in the good and bad times with them and you're really confident in their skills, it's probably a lot less risky to just go it solo for a while, build up a bit of cash, and then hire an expert that has that skill set versus feeling like you need to get into bed with someone, which is a long-term decision. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And here I am saying like, maybe get a co-founder, and I didn't even do it. So I guess there's something there where, if you just do it yourself. But I've always kind of been that person of like, if I were doing a group project and I just don't see people contributing, I'm like, screw it, I'm just going to do this myself because we got to get this out.
I was that person too.
But yeah. And I would say like with the co-founder thing too, at least I agree. I've seen some companies where the co-founders didn't get along and they kind of just fell apart. And in those types of companies, I've noticed that it's like two people that have, and I don't know, I'm just speaking from anecdotally here.
Yeah.
It's two people that didn't really know each other, have a working relationship before they started this company.
Mhm.
And so a lot of like successful co-founder relationships, what I've observed and noticed, especially like with clients I work with or companies I worked at, Webflow being one of them, is the co-founders actually used to work together at like a previous company. And they might have been on like the same team. And so they know the working style. They maybe, tag team a project together. And so they know like they worked together before. They know that
Yep.
they get along in like a working environment, which is like, that's a big thing of, I think, like some of the best co-founders might be like people you're working with, or in different departments at the same company. So yeah, you definitely want to be careful of like from day one, just trying to find a co-founder, and it's somebody that like you don't have any history with. You've never like worked. It's kind of like you were saying, getting in bed with someone. Like you're not going to ask someone to marry you on the first date.
Exactly.
It could take a few months. It could take a few years.
It takes at least a couple weeks.
Happens, so yeah, it could be one of those things where I just like, screw it, we're meant for each other, and just go get married in Vegas somewhere in like a weekend.
There we go. Elope and call it a day. Last couple questions here. I'm curious. We are the kind of guys I think we're always looking for more efficient ways to do things and looking for little tips, tricks there. I'm curious, are there, two tools that stand out to you as being a couple you found over the years that you just can't live without?
Two tools, like tactically speaking, from anything, like in terms of marketing, I guess I would say from an SEO perspective. For content, I would say ClearScope is a great tool. They're basically, if you're writing a lot of SEO content, it's a platform that tells you kind of what keywords and topics you should be including in an article if you're going around a specific keyword. So that's been very helpful. Been using that for a long time, and they even have like a bunch of great webinars too of like different content people. Like if you want to learn SEO and content, like fast track that, like just watch a lot of their webinars. Another tool, Webflow, of course. Like I can't live without Webflow. I'm in it every day. Newsletter. I mean, for newsletters, Beehive has been a really cool platform. I'm just naming off a lot of different tools. Google Docs. That's one I use a lot.
Hidden gem.
Hidden gem, Google Docs, and just Google in general. Google Trends. Google Trends is a lot. Like that keyword strategy I was talking about earlier of like doing the autocomplete. If there's like two very similar keywords and I'm trying to figure out which one I need to use or which one's the better option, I'll put them both in Google Trends and see which one has more like is higher trending. So I use that a lot for when I'm stuck between, should I go with this one or with this one? They're like very similar. I'll use Google Trends. I guess from a tactical standpoint, that's kind of it. But I'm in this weird phase of like just marketing in general where I started off in marketing being very tactical. What are the right tools? Like, how to structure this article, or like how to, what video tag should I use on YouTube and all this kind of stuff. And now I feel like I'm going back into the more like fundamentals of like, human behavior and understanding like the desires that people have and like how attached they are to certain identities and roles in their life and their beliefs about things, and kind of taking this more like, I guess, older school 1960s era style of marketing, where you really focus on like understanding human desires and wants. And I guess that comes with like writing a lot too nowadays, but that's like one trend I'm seeing in marketing, at least with a lot of clients I'm working with, a lot of them are like pulling their ad budgets and being very careful about where they spend their marketing budget. And the number one trend I'm seeing is just like $0 CAC, like cost to acquire customer, like initiatives. And a lot of that is leading to like brand marketing. And so I think with brand marketing, it's very less tactics. It's not like performance and growth. It's more so like the fundamentals of like, how do you show love for your target audience or your customers, and how are you very authentic in the way that you show up. I think one part with like Founder OS and the work that you do is that it feels very authentic to you. And so I think that's why people really enjoy it. And same with like my newsletter, a lot of it, like I'm writing it and it's oftentimes stuff I'm personally experiencing with clients I'm working with, or things I've been thinking about in my own business. And I'm just like journaling about it pretty much. And it comes off like very authentic. And I see this issue at least a lot in B2B, where people like have this expectation of how they should be creating content and like how they should be doing marketing, and kind of forgetting that what resonates with people is like authenticity and showing that like you, like as cheesy as it may sound, like you actually love them, and you have like love for them. And I wrote about this in the last edition of my newsletter about like, you know, if you love somebody, you just want to make them happy. And so if you love your customers, if you love your audience, you love your subscribers, like you just want to make them happy. And so how do you actually do that in your writing and in the words that you use in your content? And that is like what leads to that strong brand, is like people feeling this emotional attachment to something. So that is like this transition I'm kind of making from the very tactical stuff to thinking more like holistically around, you know, how do you, because like with businesses, the barrier to entry to starting a business is decreasing. Like you got no code tools like Webflow, you got LegalZoom to start your incorporate or LLC or whatever. Like it's a lot easier to start a business now. And so I feel like the hard thing is like marketing and attention. And like a noisy world, how do you stand out by actually showing love and not being the type of person that's constantly like putting call to actions everywhere? But instead just like showing up to like help somebody out genuinely, because you have that love for them. And then that will naturally, you'll get that love back over time.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think, you know, I reflect on my own kind of motivation to build Founder OS. It all started with really wanting to help founders accomplish their dreams through proven systems to really help them grow their brand, their community, and their audience. And then, you know, I think oftentimes we can kind of lose sight of, you know, when we're creating content, when we're, you know, doing anything around our business, it really is with the intention of helping people. And then when we want to think about, okay, well, how do we want to help these people? I find it oftentimes really useful to just ground it in like problem solving. Like, okay, your customer has problems, your community has problems. How can we go and understand and bubble up from our community? What are the problems that they're currently encountering that they're coming to us for? And, you know, if you're able to start even just generating a list of, you know, 15 to 30 of these problems and phrasing them as questions like, you know, how do I build my audience? How do I grow on Twitter? How do I grow on LinkedIn? Whatever these things may be, and start to then create your content strategy, form your product around solving those core problems that people have. You know, very similar to how, you know, with a product, there's kind of a job to be done. Well, there's very much a job to be done with the content that you're writing as well. And marketing serves the role of really solving problems and has a job to be done, which are, you know, the things that the questions and the problems that your customers are bubbling up. So yeah, I think that kind of like back to basics approach. And oftentimes people get super fancy with things, but it's, you know, at the end of the day, we're just as marketers trying to solve problems. I'm curious, like on the like other side of that spectrum, you know, AI has been all the rage, and it doesn't matter where you go today online, everyone's chatting about ChatGPT and how it's just going to completely transform the world. We're all going to be out of jobs and, you know, sitting on the beach, drinking margaritas and just, you know, letting the humanoid robot just do the work for us. I'm curious, from some of our conversations, I understood that you've actually been using it in a cool way to augment some of your work, but obviously not replace it, or it's not this magic pill. But, you know, could you give us a bit of details maybe on maybe how you're utilizing this new technology?
Yeah. So I'm going to be honest with you. Like I'm using it less and less, which is kind of
awesome,
weird. But there was a phase a few months ago before ChatGPT like really launched and blew up and became mainstream. There was a version of it where there was like a chat option in the OpenAI playground. And I was experimenting with it like 6 months ago, just sitting in like a library here in New York. And I was just like talking with this chat, and I was like, oh, this is like so exciting. It reminded me of this tool called Cleverbot, or this website from a few years back, where I was just having like a general conversation, like, how's your day going? Like, what's your name? Just like these very generic things. And I was like, wow, this is actually really smart. And then this ChatGPT things like finally becomes more like mainstream and more public. And I started seeing all these different use cases of like, people are like, hey, like you can write blog posts with it. You can generate meta descriptions or titles and all this stuff. And so I started experimenting with it for like a month, every single day, I was basically playing around in ChatGPT, like everything from like, how long should I cook my salmon to like, help me generate 10 ideas around these marketing topics. And the way that I started using it the most, or the way that I kind of use it now is, when I create an outline for an article, you can have ChatGPT write an outline for you, and sometimes it's actually pretty decent. But I've compared of like writing my own outline and writing ChatGPT out, having it write an outline, and I almost always go with mine. But there might be like 5 or 10% of the things that ChatGPT mentioned that I didn't think about, and I'm like, "Oh, that's actually good," and I'll like take that and put it into mine, and just disregard the other like 90%. So I think like when people use these AI tools, like you don't have to use like 100% of what it tells you to. Like I use it to maybe like get an inspiration or idea of like something maybe I'm not thinking about. But like there's times where I've said like, write me a 155 character meta description, and because I've seen use cases of that, like people on Twitter and LinkedIn talking about it, and from my perspective, it's always kind of trash what it puts out. So I started to use it less and less, and I've been really thinking about like, okay, this AI stuff, like people are thinking, oh, Google is going to die and SEO is going to die and all this stuff. And the one thing I'm left thinking is like a lot of these, like people like us create, I think there's this aspect of like, we want to pay it forward and like spread our knowledge to the world. But if you're building a creator business and you're not like already well off, or you're not retired, or if you need money to like survive, there's an incentive around creating, because you can build a business around it and you can like live off of this thing. And so if the incentive to create goes away, I really question like, how much like good content will actually be out there that people want to consume. Like when you Google stuff today, it's all the content that comes up is because people had an incentive behind writing this stuff. Like whether it was, I want to grow my audience, so I'm putting this content out, or I want more leads for my business. And there's always this like incentive tied to like creating this content. But if now say like someone just searches something in Google and AI just gives them the answer, where's the incentive of publishers and all these businesses to produce high quality content? And that's where I kind of, because of that, I'm not too worried about like SEO being too affected in like a negative way. If anything, it might, help improve the search experience, and SEOs will continue to adapt as they've always have. But in terms of AI tools, I've been kind of not using them as much, because my thing with marketing is that, and just content in general, is like, why does somebody always like go on YouTube or go on LinkedIn or go on Twitter or scroll through Instagram? Why does this habit form? And a big part of it is like people just want to see something they've never seen before. And there's this anticipation of like, I open the YouTube app, or I scroll through TikTok because there's this anticipation of like seeing something that I've never seen before. And when you do see that thing that you've never seen before, you get this kind of like dopamine rush, or whatever you want to call it. It's just like you get what you were looking for. And then it creates this habit of like, each time I anticipate, seeing something I've never seen before. And that's what makes me excited. This is why I think like Mr. Beast is one of the biggest YouTubers, because all of his YouTube ideas are like pretty original. They're not like different variations of a lot of other videos, but then like the people that kind of copy him don't do as well as he does. And so when you think about AI and content creation, if we're both typing the same stuff in ChatGPT and it's spitting out very similar ideas back at us, we're going to be creating the same type of content. And then it's going to be hard to, stand out in the sea of like very generic content, because the consumer, the viewer, the reader, whatever, is anticipating something they've never seen before. And so that's where like, I think there's this human aspect where like every single human, whatever ideas you have, your own experience, like there's only one of you. And there's not going to be like any other version of your writing out there, because there is nobody else just like you. But this robot is like very generic. And so I don't know, I was kind of like going all over the place, but I try not to use the AI stuff for generating content, because I want to create stuff that's like, I want to try to be original in what I create, because I know that's what people crave. That's what I crave. I want like new ideas and new things.
Yeah, no, I think at the end of the day, people really gravitate to humans that are real, that are engaging, and that are vulnerable. And that level of being vulnerable, being open about your failures, your achievements, I think are what really help, you form this kind of like rich one-to-one relationships with people online. And I think when it comes to things like newsletters as an example, I think whether it's Marketer Milk, Founder OS, people crave just like those real stories in there. And when it comes to storytelling, which I believe is like the greatest vehicle for, transformation, it's really hard to replicate like genuine real stories through AI. And you may just be able to go spit out a bunch of facts or something, but that's going to go nowhere. It's really that authenticity that people crave. And so, yeah, from whether it's people I know that are high up in the finance side of things or marketers or whoever in between, I'm seeing at best the tech generally being able to be used as like an entry-level analyst kind of, role where, like you're saying, you're able to kind of get like 5 to 10% maybe improvements or ideas or facts or whatever it may be from the tech at this juncture. But it's not by any means like just spewing out anything on the caliber that either of us would deem, good to go. So no, it's interesting to see as it comes along. It'd be interesting to see the developments there, but still a long way to go before it's, doing the storytelling at the level that we're looking for.
Yeah. And who knows, like I can't predict the future. Nobody can. So yeah, it could get to the point where it is really great at storytelling. But if you ask somebody, would you rather read this piece that's from a human or from a robot? Chances are they're going to want to say human. Or I could see like an article, if the author section has like a note like, hey, this was, written with AI. People are going to have some feeling about it, maybe not trust it as much, even if it's like actually saying like factual information. Yeah, it's just something about like just the human interaction that people really crave.
I'm curious here.
Like, are you leveraging any?
Oh yeah, AI. People ask me that all the time on the AI side, and I use it to play around with it, similar to sound like you were, just putting in some reps because, I don't want to be like negligent and just like kind of foo-foo what seems to be like a powerful technology, and that's something that a lot of people are talking about and it's on their mind. And so in order to like serve founders best and also, just do my research and hone in on my craft, I'm always curious. So I've been using it in different ways just to play around with it. Asking it different questions to see what comes up. I've used someone, actually a graduate of Founder OS, created something called courses.ai, where you can actually use it to go and generate your offer, your course syllabus, your initial sales emails. And I went through that to try and just learn more about his tech and help him out, but also to see like what it came up with. And when it came to actually outputting the syllabus for a course like Founder OS, it was interesting to see like the different like bonus materials that came up and the syllabus that came up. And similar to your sentiment, yeah, like I got like maybe 10% like new ideas and it got my brain going. I could see though for someone earlier on in the course creation process though, finding even more benefit from it because, you're just coming from scratch. Like, okay, what do I even want to include in my course on using Excel, let's say? And so I thought some of these tech that's being built off of GPT-3 kind of being pretty fascinating. But in terms of the stuff that we're doing, I think that me and you are doing all the stuff that's like knowledge that we've built over the last decade or so. And it's very personal to us. It's from the trials, tribulations, the lessons that we've learned as humans. And generally I find when I'm trying to parlay that knowledge to someone else, it's always wrapped in a personal story. And so the ability to use AI to somehow distill the personal lessons that I've learned and to wrap them in a story that feels authentic and that makes them memorable is next to impossible. And so while I think it's super promising for sometimes things like generating an outline for something V1 or getting some ideas that you may use some of them, it for me has not replaced, or I don't even use it for things like newsletter, courses, things like that. Like it's very, it's a cool tech. It's a cool toy right now for most things.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe imagine if you have like 1,000 blog posts that you wrote that are all these stories and then you can feed it to something. and then it like just knows how to talk like you, maybe there's something there. But it wouldn't be able to figure out any sort of the new experiences that you continue to learn each day.
Exactly.
At that point, it's just kind of
last
just
question here.
Learning.
Yeah, totally. Last question. I'm curious to hear from you. It's, I think, interesting just to go through maybe a brief case study here. I'm curious with Founder OS, growing this business from where it is today to 10 million this year. I'm curious, how do you think about like an SEO strategy for that? I know you're a consumer of the newsletter, and we've been following one another's projects here for a little bit. Curious, like just high level, how you kind of like break that down.
Yeah. In terms of like the media company aspect, I would like set expectations for a brand new website. There is this kind of like unspoken thing called like the Google sandbox, where Google doesn't want to give you a lot of rankings just yet, because you're a brand new website and it doesn't really trust you as a publisher. If every new website just started creating this like SEO optimized content, even if it's like the best piece of content in the world, Google is a robot. It's going to be like very hesitant to, hurt its user. Like it's basically hurt its
reputation,
like reputation, or just and so it's going to be very cautious with the type of content it allows it to rank. So for me personally, when I started, it took about 6 months, even though I was producing content consistently, 6 months where I saw this inflection point of like, all of a sudden it was like the floodgates opened, and then a lot of the content started ranking. So one, like, have that mindset of like, even if I'm producing all this content, it's going to be very different than say like YouTube or Twitter or LinkedIn, or even like TikTok, where you can just go viral really, really quickly. Which if you want to grow a newsletter, to be honest, is probably like really fast. It's probably better to go on social, which is something that I just didn't do. But if you want to take the more SEO, long-term, more sustainable, build out your like digital real estate that basically like lives on your own website, expect like, 6 months of kind of this slow grind. That's kind of just the expectation side. When it comes to like the content strategy, one thing I would very like focus on a lot in the early days is topical authority. And so I would niche down. I know founders is like a very, broad niche. There's different founders. There's like entrepreneurs that run brick and mortar businesses. There's content creators like us. There's people that run, like SaaS companies and there's people that run e-commerce companies. There's a broad range of businesses. So I would like try to niche down as much as possible. Like if your niche is founders, go a sub niche like SaaS founders or content creators. And even if you can niche down even more, like if content creators is a niche, then you go and like, okay, people that post on LinkedIn. And then you create a bunch of content around like growing on LinkedIn and just create a huge topical authority within LinkedIn content creation, and then slowly branch out to then maybe Instagram content creation. And just like think about it as this like very narrow, like you focus in on like one very specific type of audience, or one specific type of person really. And you create a bunch of different content around that. So for example, with me, with Marketer Milk, I kind of just like spray, and this could be a strategy too. You can just like spray with like a bunch of different stuff. Like I went everywhere from like creating content about SaaS marketing to creating content about like influencer and brand ambassadors to creating content about like building websites. And I did like a broad range of stuff, even like product like onboarding flows and all this stuff, which may borderline not even marketing, kind of a little bit. But I just started doing like a bunch of stuff because I was just looking at different keywords that I thought I could rank for. And then what I noticed is there was a theme around like the content around SaaS marketing or just SaaS in general that like ranked pretty well. And I was like, okay, wow, I have like this article. For example, I wrote an article about SaaS websites and I ended up ranking #1 for SaaS websites. And I was like, wow, this is a really interesting, like what this article is doing like way better than, this other article I wrote about like branding, for example. And so what I ended up doing is doubling down on that. And I just looked at like SaaS as a whole and like SaaS content marketing, SaaS companies, how to think about marketing in general for SaaS founders. And when I started producing that content, it indexed and ranked very quickly, and they all like ranked really well. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm becoming more like, and it made sense. Like I had been in SaaS marketing myself, and in that content, I guess it showed more. And so I decided to like double down and more on like SaaS marketing. Even though like the broader vision is like all of marketing, just in this season, it's like dumping all of my SaaS marketing knowledge first. So I would really focus on like niching down as much as possible and creating these topical things. That's at least how you're going to like beat the big competitor or the big media companies and the big established brands, is being like more, having more authority in a specific like sub niche or like sub niche. I know I didn't say like exactly like what keywords to go after and stuff, but
no,
just kind of like the
That's a
framework
great
is
strategy.
just, be for somebody, not for everybody, at least in the early days.
Invent a category, be the leader in it, niche down as much as you can, and avoid that spray and pray technique, which I'm big on. So that makes a lot of sense. Well, it's been a ton of fun, Omid, and appreciate you taking the time to be here on the Mac Ray Show and share the proven systems that you have to growing your audience, community, brand. Excited to continue to chop it up and win together online. And thanks for taking the time out here. For anyone interested in checking out Marketer Milk or Founder Us newsletter, you can check that out in the description below. So go check those out. And if you want more tips and tricks on growing your audience, these are a couple newsletters that are must-haves. So leave it there. Thanks for your time, brother. It's been fun.
All right. Thanks, Matt. It's been a great time.
Let's get it. See you, dude.